This isn't spin class." His voice cut through the dojo like a blade, and before she could flinch, his foot swept her ankle. She hit the mat hard, air gone, ribs screaming, as laughter swelled and phones lit up, eager to feed on her humiliation. "Women like you belong in Pilates, not here," he sneered, fingers resting on the black belt at his waist like a crown he hadn't earned. She pushed up slowly, eyes steady, as something cold and metallic slipped from beneath her gi, a worn military dog tag catching the light. In that instant, the room didn't yet know the fight they had just invited. If you were her, would you swallow the insult and wait? Or stand up and show them exactly who you are? Stick around. What happens next might change how you see quiet strength forever. The next morning, South Boston was still wrapped in the gray hush before dawn. In a third-floor walk-up, Emma Carter stood barefoot in a kitchen barely wide enough for one person. The coffee pot hissed, steam curling into the chill air. She poured herself a mug of black coffee, no cream, no sugar, and leaned against the small window ledge. Outside, the street was waking. A bus groaned past, headlights sliding over wet pavement. A bundled-up neighbor shuffled toward the corner store. Emma's gaze lingered on the world below, her hands cupped around the heat. Her apartment was modest, second-hand furniture, scuffed wood floors, but it carried a few pieces that told a different story. Above the small dining table hung a framed photograph of a man in marine dress blues, her father. On the shelf beside it, a shadow box displayed his medals, and in the middle, resting on a folded flag, lay a pair of worn military dog tags, one of them hers. At 34, Emma had lived several lives, 8 years in the Marine Corps, most of them as a close-quarters combat instructor. She could dismantle an armed opponent in seconds, but a roadside explosion in Afghanistan had driven shrapnel into her right shoulder, ending her military career sooner than she'd planned. She'd left the Corps with a scar that ached in cold weather and a restlessness that no amount of sleep could cure. Civilian life had been complicated. The marriage she'd entered in her 20s didn't survive the transition. By the time she landed here, in this little South Boston apartment, she'd stopped talking about the past altogether. Now, Emma worked at the VA hospital as a physical therapist. She had a knack for getting through to the veterans others couldn't reach, coaxing movement from limbs stiff with pain, reminding them that strength could return in pieces. Most of her colleagues didn't know she was one of them. She didn't offer that part of her story, and they didn't ask. Finishing her coffee, she set the mug in the sink, picked up her gym bag from its spot by the door. The strap was fraying where her thumb always rested. She ran a finger over the worn edge, a small ritual before heading out. The city outside was still waking, but Emma was already in motion. Another day, another round of quiet work no one saw coming. Emma locked the apartment door behind her and stepped into the sharp morning air. South Boston's brick facades loomed close on either side, the scent of last night's rain still clinging to the streets. She walked toward the VA hospital, boots steady on the sidewalk. The rhythm of her steps always had a way of taking her backward, back to the desert heat, the sound of rotor blades, the weight of a flak vest. She hadn't planned to leave the Marines. The Corps had been more than a job. It was a structure, a code, a family. 8 years of early mornings on training fields, of drilling recruits until they could move as one. She'd been one of the youngest hand-to-hand combat instructors in her unit, a woman in a space still dominated by men, and she'd earned every ounce of respect the hard way. Then came Afghanistan, a roadside bomb. The flash, the roar, the heat that seemed to peel the world apart. When she woke in the field hospital, her right shoulder was bandaged, the muscle torn, shrapnel lodged deep enough that the surgeons warned her about permanent weakness. They didn't mention the other damage, the kind that woke her in the night, heart hammering, certain she was still under fire. The medical discharge had been quick, almost businesslike. Papers signed, uniforms boxed, life reduced to a DD-214 form. She flew back to the States carrying a duffel bag and the gnawing question of who she was without the Corps. Civilian life didn't fit easily. The routines felt slack, the days too quiet. She married a man she had met through friends, a good man, at least at first, but he didn't understand the shadows she carried. When the nightmares came, he'd turn over in bed, not knowing what to say. When her frustration at her own limits boiled over, he'd tell her she needed to move on from who she'd been. The end came on an unremarkable Tuesday. His bags were already by the door when she got home. "You need to figure out who you are now," he'd said, not unkindly, but with finality. She didn't argue. Maybe he was right. 6 months later, the divorce papers were signed, and Emma stopped expecting anyone else to understand. At the VA, working with injured veterans gave her purpose. She could meet their gaze and speak the unspoken language of people who had seen the same things. But there was still a restlessness in her bones, a need for challenge, not in a boardroom or a casual weekend hobby, but in something that demanded every ounce of discipline she still had. That itch, unacknowledged for months, was about to find its outlet. That itch finally had a name. It started at work. A former Marine she was rehabbing, a wiry man in his 50s with a rebuilt knee, mentioned how Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu had saved his sanity. "Gives you back control," he told her. "You can't think about the past when someone's trying to choke you out." He grinned, but his eyes were dead serious. She heard it again from a younger vet, still limping from a hip injury, and again from a quiet Army medic who barely spoke during sessions, except when describing the calm he found on the mat. Emma looked it up one night, scrolling through videos in the dim light of her kitchen. Fighters in white G's moved like water one second, steel the next. It wasn't brute force. It was patience, leverage, timing, discipline wrapped in motion. She liked that. Boston Valor Jiu-Jitsu sat in a renovated warehouse in an upscale part of the city. Glass front, polished floors, rows of framed tournament medals. The monthly fee made her hesitate, half her rent, but something in her chest said it would be worth it. She went in on a Thursday evening. The front desk was manned by a teenager who looked like he'd been born on a mat. She filled out the forms, signed the waiver, and waited. Then he appeared, the head instructor. Broad shoulders, shaved head, the kind of walk that said the room belonged to him. Black belt knotted tight. He scanned her once, from worn sneakers to thrift store jacket, and something flickered. Amusement, maybe. "We do have a few women here," he said, "but this isn't cardio kickboxing, it's intense training." "I understand," she answered. And she meant it. The first week, she kept to herself, learned the language of grips and guard passes, let the young hotshots muscle through drills while she worked quietly, precisely. The movements came back to her faster than she expected. Different from military combatives, but the same bones underneath. By week 3, she could feel his eyes on her more often. The corrections he gave were curt, almost perfunctory. She didn't mind. Being underestimated was an old, familiar cloak. Still, the itch was there, pushing her to test herself. She signed up for 3 classes a week, juggled extra shifts at the VA to cover the cost, kept her mouth shut, her head down. But under the surface, something was building. The mat was starting to feel like home, and she knew, sooner or later, someone was going to try and take that from her. The first month was all about repetition. Emma arrived early, before most students. The mats still smelled faintly of disinfectant, the air cool and quiet. She used that time to stretch, to map the space in her head. Classes were loud once they started, feet shuffling, GIs snapping, the dull thud of bodies hitting the floor. She moved through drills with steady precision, no wasted motion, no showy bursts of strength. Partners changed every few minutes. Some were polite, some tried to muscle her into mistakes. She let them think it was working until it wasn't. A shift of her hips, a grip change, and suddenly their weight was off balance. She always released before they could feel the full lock. No reason to show all her cards. The instructor rarely lingered near her. When he did, his corrections were clipped, as if checking a box. She nodded, adjusted, and kept going. Being overlooked suited her for now. In the locker room, chatter floated between rows of benches. Weekend plans, new gear, tournament gossip. Emma changed quickly, kept her voice low when spoken to. Most nights, she was the first out the door. Still, patterns emerged. A few students watched her a little too closely during sparring rounds. One white belt, barely out of college, asked where she'd trained before. "Here and there," she answered. It was true enough. At home, she replayed the movements in her head. Sometimes on the living room floor, with furniture pushed aside. The scar on her shoulder pulled when she moved a certain way. She learned to adjust, to make the technique work with what her body could still give. The work at the VA helped. Guiding others through pain kept her honest about her own limits, but the mat was different. On the mat, there were no patient charts, no checklists, just her, another body, and the problem between them. By week 6, she was rolling through techniques faster, timing sharper, breathing steadier. But she stayed quiet. Let the others rush, stumble, burn out. She had learned long ago that the most dangerous fighter in the room is often the one nobody sees coming. One night, during a passing drill, she caught a flash of something in the instructor's eyes. Not respect, something closer to calculation. She'd seen that look before, in different uniforms. It meant he'd noticed. She filed it away. The mat was starting to teach her again, and she knew, deep down, that every lesson was leading toward a moment she couldn't yet see. It started small. One evening, during a guard pass drill, her partner's grip slipped. She adjusted his elbow just enough to fix the angle. The instructor's voice came sharp across the mat. "If you think you know better, maybe you should teach the class." The room went quiet for a beat. Emma met his eyes briefly, then looked away. "Sorry," she said, and kept moving. But something had shifted. Over the next week, she noticed it. Partners hesitating when paired with her, a few sidelong glances, conversations that stopped when she walked by. During sparring, he circled the room but rarely came near her. When he did, it was to correct, loudly, something minor. Grip placement, knee angle, things he let slide with others. She didn't push back. She'd been in hierarchies before. She knew how fragile egos could be. Still, the air was different now. In one class, while demonstrating a choke defense, he used her as the example. His grip was tighter than necessary. When she tapped, he held for a heartbeat longer than comfort. The smile on his face didn't reach his eyes. Afterward, in the locker room, a younger woman asked, "What did you do to him?" "Nothing," Emma said, tying her hair back. It was the truth, but truth wasn't the point here. She recognized the pattern. Attention turning into scrutiny, scrutiny into challenge. In the military, it often came before a test, one designed to put you in your place. At home, she thought about it while running drills on her own. Furniture pushed against the walls, bare feet on the cool floor. The silence between movements was heavy. She remembered something her father used to say. People test you for two reasons. Either they want to see you fail, or they're afraid you won't. It was getting harder to tell which one this was. By week 8, the tension had a pulse. She could feel it in the way he called her name, in the way certain students smiled when she walked to the center of the mat, as if they knew something was coming. She didn't rise to it, not yet, but the seed was planted, and seeds have a way of growing when the ground is this fertile. The break came on a Tuesday night. Class was packed. Warm-ups done, the instructor called her to the center, said he wanted to demonstrate proper balance against a bigger opponent. She knew the tone. He gripped her sleeve, swept her legs with more force than the move required. Her back hit the mat hard enough to echo. A burst of laughter followed. "See?" he told the class. "This is why fundamentals matter. Some people just don't have it." She stood, bowed, and stepped aside. From then on, the message was clear. During partner drills, her name was often left off the list. "Sit this one out. Watch and learn," he'd say, without meeting her eyes. When she did get a partner, it was someone brand new. She guided them through basic grips while watching others roll freely. One night, she found her gym bag moved to a spot near the restroom, far from where she always left it. No one said anything. They didn't have to. The bulletin board was worse. Taped to it, still frames from the takedown, captioned in thick marker, "Technique gone wrong." She tore nothing down, just looked at it, then went to warm up. Even off the mat, the shadow followed. At a coffee shop near the academy, 2 students stood ahead of her in line. One mimed an exaggerated fall, arms flailing. The other laughed until he noticed her behind them. The smile dropped. No apology came. At the VA, one patient quietly asked for a different therapist. She heard later he'd seen something online and didn't think she was serious. It wasn't the work. She'd done worse jobs, taken harsher hits. It was the intent, the quiet campaign to make her feel small, to remind her she was an outsider. But outsiders see what insiders miss. She noticed the gaps in the instructor's technique when he demonstrated slowly, the hitch in his movement when pressure hit a certain joint, the habits his students mirrored without knowing why. She filed it all away. Every slight, every laugh, every chance they gave her to disappear, because she wasn't planning to disappear, not here. She didn't stop showing up. 3 nights a week, she was there. On time. G folded neat, eyes steady. She took the drills they gave her and made them sharper, but the real work happened elsewhere. Twice a week, after her shift at the VA, she walked to a community center in Dorchester. No polished floors, no glossy posters, just worn mats and the faint smell of sweat that never fully left. That's where she met him, Master Sergeant Tom Reyes. Broad, weathered, with a voice like gravel. He'd spotted her once at the VA. recognized the set of her shoulders, the way she scanned a room. "You're wasted where you are," he'd said. "Should be teaching, not sitting out drills." She told him about Jiu-Jitsu. He nodded once, like that explained everything. "All right, let's get to work." Training with Reyes was different. No crowds, no eyes waiting for her to slip. Every move was stripped down to its bones. They drilled until her GI stuck to her skin, until her forearms ached from grip fights, until her shoulder, rebuilt and stubborn, learned to hold under pressure again. He taught her how to turn being underestimated into a weapon, how to let an opponent think they were winning, right up to the moment they weren't. At the academy, she played the part, missed sweeps by inches, let grips slide, moved just slow enough to look ordinary. But under the surface, she was stacking hours. Her apartment became an extension of the mat, furniture pushed back against the walls, dog tags swinging lightly against her chest as she drilled transitions alone. The scar on her shoulder tugged with each rep, a reminder of where she'd been and why she wasn't done yet. Sometimes, late at night, she'd hear the laughter from that takedown replay in her head. Instead of pushing it away, she used it, matched each sound with a counter, a setup, a finish. Reyes never asked what she planned to do with all this work. He didn't have to. One evening, after she nailed a clean sweep into submission, he gave a rare smile. "Timing's everything. The question is, when you decide to show them." She didn't answer. Not yet. But she knew the day was coming. And when it did, no one at that shiny academy would see it coming. The gym was quiet that night. Only the hum of old fluorescent lights and the muffled thud of their bare feet on the mat. They had been rolling for nearly an hour. Sweat darkened the edges of Emma's gi, her breathing steady but heavy. Reyes called for a break. He lowered himself onto the edge of the mat, knees creaking. Emma sat across from him, untying and retying her belt out of habit. "You've got it," he said. No grin, no pat on the back, just the plain truth. She didn't reply. Compliments from him were rare, and they weren't the kind you tossed back with a thank you. He leaned forward, forearms on his knees. "You've been holding back for weeks. I know why. I've done it myself. But here's the thing. There's a point where holding back stops being smart and starts being cowardice." The words landed heavier than the drills. Emma looked at the mat. "It's not fear," she said. "I know it's not." His voice was calm. "It's timing. But timing can slip through your fingers if you wait too long. And when the right moment comes, you'd better hit it so clean they can't breathe afterward." He reached over to his bag, pulled out a small cloth, and began wiping down his palms. "They think you're nothing. That's fine. Let them. But understand something. Every day you walk in there, you're carrying more than just yourself. You're carrying every woman they've brushed off, every vet they've underestimated, every person who walked out because they didn't see a place for them." Emma felt the weight of that. It wasn't new, but hearing it aloud gave it shape. He stood, joints popping, and offered her a hand up. "The question isn't if you can beat him. It's if you're ready to live with what happens when you do." She took his hand, rose to her feet. "I'll know when it's time." Reyes gave a short nod, the kind that closed a conversation. "Then make sure I'm there when it happens." They went back to drilling. No more talk. Just the slap of feet, the snap of grips, and the quiet understanding that something was coming, something that would leave no room for doubt. At the VA, she knelt beside a young amputee, tightening a frayed white belt. "One grip at a time," she whispered. He stood, wobbled, then found his base. His smile was small. Hers was quieter. The morning of the Boston Open was sharp with spring air. Emma woke before the alarm. The city outside her window was still wrapped in blue shadow. She made coffee, drank it standing, eyes on the dog tag resting on the counter. She'd signed up weeks ago. Women's Blue Belt Division. On paper, she was still a white belt at Boston Valor. Chad had refused to promote her, no matter how clean her technique. When he saw her name on the tournament list, the smirk was gone. "You're not ready," he'd told her in front of the class. "Don't embarrass us." She hadn't argued. The registration fee was already paid. Non-refundable. Now, she packed her G into her bag, folded crisp, slipped the dog tag into the inner pocket. The convention center was already buzzing when she arrived. Competitors warming up on side mats. Coaches barking instructions. The scent of tape, sweat, and anticipation thick in the air. Boston Valor had a corner staked out. Team banner, neat rows of gear. Chad stood in the center talking to his favorites. When she approached, the circle closed just enough to leave her outside. "Maybe wait somewhere else," one teammate said, voice light but eyes sharp. She found a quiet spot near the bleachers, unrolled her belt, began her own warm-up, shoulder rolls, deep squats, measured breathing. In the hum of the crowd, her mind went still. Her bracket was posted. Matches in the afternoon. Enough time to watch, to learn. She tracked the movement of opponents, noting habits, how they set grips, where they left a space. From across the mats, she spotted Reyes. He didn't wave, just gave a slow nod. That was enough. One by one, Boston Valor's fighters took their turns. Cheers for wins. Quiet grumbles for losses. Chad was loud for all of them, except her. Not why she showed up in a tournament, noise was just another variable. And she'd learned long ago how to filter noise out. By midday, her division was being called to staging. She walked over, heart steady. The official checked her name, wristband, ID. She could feel the shift coming. Not yet clear, but close, like a storm on the edge of the horizon. This wasn't just another class. This was a stage. And stages have a way of revealing exactly who belongs on them. She tightened her belt, stepped onto the mat area, and waited for her name. Whatever happened next, she was ready to meet it head-on. They were halfway through the black belt division when the announcement came. A voice over the loudspeaker cut through the noise. Due to a medical withdrawal, we have an open slot. Next eligible alternate, please report to the registration desk. Emma Carter. For a moment, she thought she'd misheard. Then the stares started. Chad was on his feet before she could move. He stalked toward the official's table, voice raised. She's a white belt. She can't compete at this level. The tournament director, a woman with silver hair and the posture of someone who'd spent decades on the mat, didn't flinch. She's registered as an alternate, credentials verified. Per tournament rules, alternates backed by accredited instructors may be bumped up to fill emergency slots, even in the black belt division. Emma stepped forward, calm as if she'd been called for a coffee order. What credentials? Chad demanded. A shadow moved in beside her. Reyes. Staff Sergeant Carter, former Marine Corps close quarters combat instructor, qualified and cleared. His tone left no room for doubt. The murmur in the crowd grew louder. People glanced at her hands, at the way she stood. Pieces were falling into place. Chad's jaw tightened. She's never shown black belt skills here. That's on you, Reyes said. Not her. The director's voice was final. Slot's hers unless she declines. Emma met her eyes. I'll take it. There was a beat of silence before the director checked the updated bracket. First match, Emma Carter versus Chad Preston. The air shifted. Conversations hushed. Even the neighboring mats seemed to quiet. Chad's protest died in his throat. Too many eyes were on him now. Too much risk in pulling back. Emma bowed slightly to the director, then stepped away. She found her corner, sat on the edge of the mat, and began to wrap her fingers with steady precision. She could feel the thrum in the room, the mix of curiosity, doubt, and something sharper. For weeks, she had taken the hits, swallowed the comments, kept her fire banked low. Now, the door had swung open on its own, and she was about to walk through it. She didn't look for Reyes, but she knew he was watching. The moment he'd told her about had arrived, and timing. Timing was everything. They called her name to the mat. Emma stood, smoothed the front of her GI, and walked out. The lights above the competition floor felt brighter, sharper, like they were slicing the air into pieces. Across from her, Chad was already there. Black belt tight, smile tighter. He rolled his shoulders like a man ready to swat away a nuisance. The referee motioned them forward. Face each other, bow. She bowed, eyes steady. The crowd leaned in. Most of them had only seen her as the woman in the viral still shots, the one on the wrong end of a takedown. From the corner, Reyes's voice carried just enough for her to hear. Breathe. Remember who you are. The referee held up a hand to signal the start, but before it dropped, the announcer's voice cut in. Competitors, a quick note. This match has been approved under special eligibility, with credentials verified by the Marine Corps Combat Instructor Program. A ripple went through the stands. People turned to each other, whispering, Marine Corps, Combat Instructor. Emma let the words hang in the air. Didn't nod, didn't deny, just stood, her breathing slow, her hands loose at her sides. Chad shifted his weight. The smirk faltered. Somewhere in the crowd, a man's voice rose. That's her. Afghanistan Tour, 2010. She trained our unit. The energy shifted again. Curiosity sharpened into expectation. Emma rolled her shoulders once. The scar beneath her GI pulled slightly, a familiar tug. The referee's hand dropped. Fight. She didn't lunge, didn't rush. Let him come. because this wasn't about surprising him with speed. It was about showing everyone in the room exactly why underestimating her had been the first mistake, and when the opening came, she would take it. No hesitation, no mercy for the months they'd tried to make her invisible. The kind of precision that left nothing for him to explain afterward except the truth. He came in hard. Chad's hands shot for her collar, trying to crush the space before she could set her base. His weight drove forward, fast, heavy, confident. Emma let him have the first step, let him feel like he was winning. Her left hand caught his sleeve. Right hand shifted to control his wrist, a quick pivot of her hips. His balance cracked for just a breath. It was all she needed. She slid under, her legs threading high over his shoulder. The crowd gasped, the sound of guy fabric snapping as she locked in. Pressure, tight, perfect. Chad's free hand clawed at her leg too late. His elbow was already trapped, his shoulder stretched. She arched just enough to make the choice for him. Tap or snap. The slap of his hand on the mat was sharp and final. 14 seconds. The referee stepped in, breaking the hold. Emma released immediately, swinging her legs clear, rising to her feet in one smooth motion. The announcer's voice rang out over the noise. "Winner, by submission, Emma Carter!" Applause erupted, scattered at first, then rolling through the stands. People were on their feet, phones up, trying to catch the replay. Chad stayed on his knees a moment too long, then stood without looking at her. No handshake, just a stiff walk off the mat, past his team, jaw clenched. Emma bowed to the referee, then to the judges. Her breathing was calm, almost too calm for what had just happened. Reyes was there at the edge of the mat, arms crossed, a rare smile flickering under the brim of his cap. "Clean work," he said. "Your father would have been proud." The words caught her more than the win. She touched the dog tag under her guy, feeling the cool metal against her skin. Around them, the noise swelled again. 14 seconds, someone shouted from the stands, but she didn't bask in it, didn't raise her hands or pump a fist, because for her, this wasn't the finish. It was just the door finally opening, and she was already thinking about what came next. She stepped off the mat, the noise still chasing her. A few strangers reached out as she passed, hands clasping her shoulder, quick words of praise. She nodded politely, kept moving. Her corner was empty. Boston Valor's banner loomed nearby, but no one from the team looked her way. Eyes slid past her as if she wasn't there. She knelt to retie her belt, the knot firm, exact. The shouts from another match bled into the space around her, a reminder the tournament was still rolling forward. Most fighters would have stayed, soaking in the moment, replaying the victory. She didn't. Instead, she rose, slipped her jacket over her gi, and walked toward a smaller mat at the far end of the hall. There, a teenage girl sat in a wheelchair by the edge, waiting for her match in an adaptive division. Nervous fingers twisted the end of her belt. Emma crouched beside her. "Breathe," she said softly. "One grip at a time. You know what to do." The girl looked up, surprise flickering into a shaky smile. When her match was called, Emma wheeled her forward, locking eyes with her coach to signal she'd stay close. From the sideline, Emma called steady cues. "Set your base. Good. Now turn." Her voice carried over the crowd, calm and sure. The girl fought hard. Won by points. When the referee raised her hand, her face lit up in a way no medal could match. Someone nearby caught it on camera. Emma, kneeling next to the chair, clapping once, her own expression warm but quiet. The clip would make its way online later, stitched right after the footage of her 14-second win. People would share it with captions about true strength and lifting others. But in that moment, none of that existed. Emma stood, adjusted the girl's lap blanket, and handed her back to her coach. "Well done," she said simply. Then she stepped away, back into the crowd, blending into the hum of the tournament. The win was behind her. The next match, hers or someone else's, was already beginning. For her, that was enough. By the time she returned to the main floor, the whispers had shifted. It wasn't just 14 seconds anymore. It was the sight of her kneeling beside the wheelchair. The way she'd stayed after the win to help someone else fight their own match. People she didn't know met her eyes and gave small nods. A few competitors stepped aside to let her pass. Reyes caught her near the bleachers. "That," he said, jerking his chin toward the smaller mat, "is what they'll remember." Emma shrugged. "It's what matters." Matches rolled on. The noise rose and fell like a tide. She watched, not as a competitor now, but as someone cataloging moments, small victories, quiet acts that wouldn't trend online. Her phone buzzed in her bag. A teammate from the VA had sent a link. She opened it to see the video already making the rounds. Her armbar against Chad cut straight to her coaching the girl in the wheelchair. Comments were flooding in, veterans recognizing her, strangers calling her a role model, others writing that she'd shown what martial arts was supposed to be about. She locked the screen and set the phone down. Recognition was fine, but it wasn't the point. The point was in the girl's grin when the referee lifted her hand, in the way her shoulders loosened, just for a moment, as if something heavy had been set aside. Emma knew that feeling. The day had more matches to give, but for her, the work was already done. She'd proven what she needed to prove, to Chad, to the room, maybe even to herself. Reyes walked past again, slowing just enough to murmur, "Timing was right." She gave him a faint smile. "Told you I'd know." In the weeks to come, she wouldn't talk much about the submission. When people asked, she'd redirect to the program she was building, the adaptive classes, the veteran sessions, because winning was never the finish line. It was just an opening, and what you did with that opening, that was the real test. By Monday, the clip was everywhere. Not just on martial arts forums, it had slipped into veteran community pages, local news feeds, even a few national outlets that liked a clean story. Combat vet humbles arrogant coach in 14 seconds. But it was the second half of the video people kept talking about. The wheelchair match. The calm voice on the sideline. The look on the girl's face when she won. At Boston Valor, the air had changed. No more smirks when she walked in. Conversations didn't stop mid-sentence, but they didn't exactly include her either. Chad was absent. Suspended, pending review, according to the terse email from management. The owner, Maxwell Reed, called her into his office. Polished desk, framed photos with fighters and local politicians. "Quite the weekend," he began, fingers steepled. "You've gotten a lot of attention." She waited. "We value our members," he continued, "and I think we may have underestimated your potential. I'd like to offer you a role here. Women's self-defense, maybe veterans classes? Your story is marketable." She almost laughed. "I appreciate the offer," she said evenly, "but I've already got plans." His smile froze for a fraction too long. "Think about it." She didn't need to. Outside the office, a few students glanced her way, then back at their drills. Respect didn't grow overnight, and she wasn't chasing it here. At the VA, things felt different. Patients she'd worked with for months brought up the video, some shyly, some with outright pride. One old Marine, stubborn as stone, finally tried an exercise he'd refused before. "Figured if you can get back on the mat," he said, "I can get back on my feet." That night, she trained at the community center. The mats were worn, the lighting dim, but the welcome was real. Reyes watched her run drills with a group of new vets, letting them struggle, find their own balance. "You've got momentum now," he said later, tossing her a water bottle. "Use it for something that lasts." She nodded. The noise from the tournament was already fading online. That was fine. Viral moments burned fast. What she wanted couldn't be built in a week. It would take time, patience, and the same steady pressure it took to finish a submission, tight enough to hold, calm enough to wait. And she knew exactly where to start. She didn't make a big announcement. One quiet afternoon she walked into Boston Valor, duffel over her shoulder. The mats were empty, the echo of a heavy bag swinging somewhere in the back. Maxwell looked up from behind the front desk, surprise flickering across his face. "Emma, back for training?" "No," she said, "just here to settle my account." She handed over a short, typed letter. Membership cancellation, effective immediately. At the bottom, her signature in clean, steady ink. "I'm sorry to hear that," he said, though his voice carried more calculation than regret. "If this is about Chad, you should know we're reviewing—" "It's not about Chad," she cut in. "It's about where I'm going next." He read her face for a long second, then nodded. "If you ever change your mind, the door's open." She doubted it. The locker room was quiet as she cleared out the last of her gear. A spare guy, a pair of battered gloves, a rolled-up towel she'd forgotten in the corner. Her reflection in the mirror looked the same, but lighter somehow. On her way out, she paused at the edge of the mat. The surface still carried the faint scent of disinfectant and effort. She remembered the first night she'd stepped here, how the space had felt like possibility. Now it felt like a chapter, one she was ready to close. Outside, the air smelled of rain. She pulled her jacket tight and started walking. The city moved around her. Traffic, footsteps, the hum of 1,000 unrelated lives. Her phone buzzed. A text from Reyes. "Got a minute to talk about your new class?" She smiled to herself. The answer was yes. By the time she reached her apartment, the decision felt complete. The space she'd been giving to Boston Valor was already filling with something else: plans, outlines, faces of people who might step onto her mats one day. She hung her gi by the window, the fabric still holding the shape of movement. The dog tag lay on the table beside it, catching the last thin stripe of daylight. She didn't need Boston Valor to prove anything anymore. The proof was in the work ahead. Her apartment soon filled with plans. Sheets of paper covered the kitchen table, outlines, schedules, notes. A small whiteboard stood in the corner, crowded with names and goals. She wasn't just building a class, she was building a community. Twice a week, veterans gathered in a small community center on Dorchester Avenue. The mats were worn, edges frayed, but the energy was electric. Emma led them through drills tailored for bodies marked by war and injury. Movements slow and deliberate at first, building strength and confidence. The faces in the room changed, but the focus remained. These were more than exercises. They were steps toward reclaiming control. A former Navy medic, shoulders tight from years of desk work, found new ease in his posture. A young Marine grappling with PTSD learned to channel frustration into technique. Emma watched quietly, adjusting grips, offering gentle corrections. She wasn't just a teacher here, she was a guide, helping others find their way back. Word spread. The waiting list grew. Calls came from other VA centers, from veterans groups hungry for something real, something healing. She hired Reyes as assistant instructor. His gruff demeanor balanced her calm. Together, they created a curriculum that blended martial arts with therapy. It wasn't just about fighting anymore, it was about survival. One evening, after a long session, a student approached her. This changed everything for me," he said, voice thick. "I didn't think I could feel safe again." She nodded, knowing the road ahead was long, but in that moment, the weight of what she'd started settled over her like a quiet promise. Outside, the city lights blinked awake. Inside, the mats were still warm from the day's work, and Emma knew this was just the beginning. The program grew faster than she expected, from one community center to 3, each space different. One in a church basement, another in a converted gym, a third inside a veterans shelter. But all shared the same worn mats and hopeful faces. Veterans came, women and men, young and old. Some limped in, some carried scars deeper than the eye could see, but they all found something here, a place where pain met patience. One afternoon, a familiar face appeared. Claire, once a skeptical student at Boston Valor, the one who had whispered doubts and shared laughs at Emma's expense. Now she stood shyly at the edge of the mat, hands folded. "I'm sorry," Claire said quietly, "for everything. I didn't understand." Emma studied her. The apology was simple, genuine. "We all judge before we know," Emma replied. "What matters is what we do next." Claire nodded, eyes bright with unshed tears. "I want to help. Volunteer." Together, they began training Claire, not just in technique but in empathy, in understanding trauma and boundaries. Slowly, Claire transformed from critic to advocate. She spoke at veterans groups, helped organize sessions, became a bridge between worlds. Even Maxwell Reed reached out. He offered Emma a position as head instructor at a new Boston Valor location. Full control over curriculum, culture, and community. Emma thanked him, but declined. "This is where I'm needed," she said. Her focus was clear. The program wasn't about prestige or profit. It was about healing. Real, lasting healing. With Reyes by her side and a growing circle of veterans and volunteers, Emma kept building. The dog tag around her neck glinted softly under the fluorescent lights of the newest training room, a quiet symbol of strength, resilience, and the power of second chances. And the journey was far from over. Emma stood alone in the quiet gym, the soft glow of the evening sun filtering through the windows. Her dog tags rested against her chest, a silent reminder of the battles fought, both seen and unseen. She wasn't the woman who had been pushed down on that mat, not anymore. Strength wasn't about dominating others. It was about knowing your worth when no one else did. The mission mattered, not the noise. And in this space, with every veteran who stepped onto the mat, that mission lived on. Every mat she rolled out was a promise kept. If Emma's story touched something inside you, quiet courage, resilience, or hope, share it. Because sometimes the strongest fight is the one you never see. Subscribe and join us as we share stories of ordinary people who change the world through their courage. What challenge will you face today with quiet strength? Choose. Stand silent or stand tall. The choice is yours.